Be seated. We also want to thank special guest commissioner that's joining us from the city of McAllen, Mr. Omar Quintanilla. Thank you so much for joining us. And I do want to remind you that applauses are not allowed. And of course, this is throughout the responses of the candidates. And now let's welcome our City of Pharr Mayor, Dr. Ambrosio Hernandez.
Morning, everybody.
Good morning. Buenos días. Bienvenidos todos. First, I'll start off in English. Welcome to the great city of Pharr, ladies and gentlemen, candidates. We're so delighted to have you guys here with us today. As you all know, Pharr is in the district. It's very important to us to have the right representative for us. From my perspective as a voter, but also as a mayor of Pharr, let's be clear. What we absolutely need for our city to represent us, somebody who has the same values that we do. It is irrelevant to me what New Jersey or California wants to do. What is relevant to me is what the district needs, what the city of Pharr needs, and it's all the residents of that district. We want somebody with integrity, honesty. I don't need flip-flopping. I don't need little punchlines for answers. I don't want to hear anything about being a partisan group, fighting. That's not who we want to vote in. We want people to go to Washington and actually get things done, not just to be on Facebook and social media and TikToks and doing crazy things that's not what we sent you for. We send you so you do not sell out. You represent us in our district. This is our home, our backyard, and that's what we expect people to do for us. La gente de Pharr, aquí estamos hoy con los candidatos para el distrito, para el Congress. Y lo que queremos, aquí estamos con las señoritas y los jóvenes aquí, que van a, según ellos, representar a nuestras familias.
I'm going to try to keep comments to a minimum. I don't want to interrupt, of course, unless it's, needed.
No queremos escándalos, no queremos que gente que anden peleando solamente para andar en el social media, para andar haciendo en el periódico y luego brincando, cambiando de opiniones por dinero, se andan vendiendo. Queremos un candidato o candidata que sea bueno para nuestra gente. No les importa.
Is he talking about anybody in particular?
Ellos tienen su representante. Uno de estos van a ser nuestros. Pero también tenemos que asegurar que es la persona mejor para nosotros. Integrity, honesty, transparency, what we want. Es lo que queremos para la ciudad de Pharr y es lo que esperamos. Y esperamos cuando se pregunten estas preguntas, que las respuestas, the answer given, son honestas y no es algo que nomás están leyendo. No, yo necesito que estén leyendo lo que la gente quiere oír. Quiero que los digan a nosotros. ¿Qué vas a hacer para nuestras escuelas, para nuestros colegios? El dinero que necesitamos para la frontera, para trabajos.
I know you're all asking if she's there. I'm assuming because he said what he said, she must be there, right?
No, queremos saber quién eres tú. No me importa. Yo cuando corrí por el alcalde, la gente no me preguntaba si era doctor. Querían saber qué vas a hacer por mí. Yo no quiero saber si eres maestro, eres abogado, eres en construcción. Quiero saber qué vas a hacer para nuestra gente. What are you going to do? It is irrelevant whether you're a physician, as I am, whether you're an attorney, a business, a leader, if you're a teacher, irrelevant. Veteran, irrelevant. What we want to know is what do you represent in our district and what are you doing for us? Don't forget that. That is why they're here. We expect a very lively and honest discussion. We have a great panel. We're going to be asking questions. Please pay attention. Voters of Pharr. Pon cuidado, los votantes de Pharr, because you will reshape this district. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. At this time, Mr. Mario Lizcano would like to thank very special guests that are just joining us last minute, but they're here.
Thank you so much. I, as coming up here, just getting a little nervous. I want to make sure that we recognize our board member who came to the back. I'd like for Mr. John Rodriguez to please stand. Our board member from the Greater Pharr Chamber of Commerce representing Burt Ogden. Thank you, Mr. Rodriguez, for joining us today. And Ms. Laura Warren, our board member that's coming in. So thank you very much. If she could please stand. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lizcano. And now I want to bring to the podium, to the stage, two very special guests. We have Veronica Gonzalez. Veronica Gonzalez, our co-moderator, Senior Vice President for Governmental and Community Relationships for UTRGV, and journalist from The Guardian, Steve Taylor, our other co-moderator.
It's a green. You can't see it. I'll show it to you later.
Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Pharr Chamber's Battle of the Minds. Many thanks to all of those who are joining us via live stream today. As was mentioned, my name is Veronica Gonzalez. I'm going to be one of your moderators today, along with my friend and journalist, Steve Taylor from the Rio Grande Valley Guardian. This event, as was mentioned earlier, is being live streamed by the Pharr Chamber. Live streaming by candidates is not permitted. Today, we have the candidates for Congressional District 15 joining us. And District 15 is the district that includes the city of Pharr, as well as much of Hidalgo County.
That
which
means
stretches
she
up
can't
across
be on her
Brooks,
phone, right,
Generals,
up
Live Oak,
there,
Karnes,
like
Wilson,
she
and
did last
Guadalupe
time?
counties. It's a very large district. Please know that all candidates on both sides of the aisle were invited to participate. The chamber was recently advised, however, that there was a Republican event outside the Rio Grande Valley that conflicted with this one, which is probably why you do not see any of the Republican candidates joining us today. As for format, we are going to begin with a 1-minute introduction from each candidate. Because we have numerous candidates and limited time, we have a timekeeper. Ms. Daisy's here, and she will keep us on track with time. After the 1-minute introduction, we're going to begin with the questions and answers. We're going to pose a question to a particular candidate, allow him or her 90 seconds to answer, and then give each remaining candidate 60 seconds to respond or provide a rebuttal should he or she wish to do so. If necessary, we may prompt a follow-up question or discussion after the initial response. We will see how many questions we can fit into our time together today. To our audience, while the topics we cover are probably nothing new to the candidates, please know the candidates were not provided the questions ahead of time because we didn't want any scripted responses, as the mayor mentioned. Finally, we ask that everyone keep this forum professional and cordial. While you may not agree with a candidate, or you may not have a preference to, or you may have a preference towards a particular candidate, please do not heckle candidates or clap or cheer after response. We want to
Dang,
keep
all
this
these
very professional,
rules.
and we want you to learn something new today that will help you as you go to the polls and cast your votes starting on Monday. Running for public office is not easy. It takes a lot of time away from your job, from your family and your friends. And in the world we live in today, everything, as you know, is taped. There are instant messages posted, and at times it can be very taxing on the candidates. But these men and women have put themselves out there because they care about their community, so we hope that you will give them your attention and appreciation. And with that, we're going to get started. Steve, do you want to add anything?
Just very briefly to say thanks for everyone for coming out. Thanks for everyone that's watching online. My name's Steve Taylor. I'm editor and co-founder of the Rio Grande Guardian. I'm just looking forward to this debate today because the stakes couldn't be higher. This is an open seat. So we're going to have a brand new member of Congress for District 15. Once candidates win, it's unusual for incumbents to lose unless they've been there for a very long time. So this is the chance, the best chance for the voters of this district to have a say, and an impactful say, because we're going to elect a brand new member of Congress for this important district. So I look forward to a very robust debate.
Let's get this started.
Afternoon. So we are going to start in the order that you are on the ballot, and we're going to allow you 1 minute to provide us an introduction about yourself. So we will start with you, Ms. Vallejo.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for being here. My name is Michelle Vallejo, and I'm a daughter of immigrants and a small business owner that grew up right here in Alton, Texas. My parents did a lot of things growing up, but what has fundamentally defined my work ethic and my family values is my family running Pulga Los Portales. I'm a product of Mission CISD, where at 7 years of age, my educators caught me slipping through the cracks, and they set me on a path to attending Columbia University. While studying in New York, my mom, after battling multiple sclerosis for 15 years and at only 46 years of age, took her last breath. This put into perspective that I had to come back home and fight for a better life for all of us, and that's exactly what I did. I stepped up and I came back home to work with my dad to run Pulga Los Portales. I also co-founded an organization that serves leaders throughout the entire frontera from Laredo to Brownsville. And I also started an organization that brings together women in business throughout all of South Texas that's headquartered in San Antonio. And now I have been nominated and endorsed to run for Congress by Lupe Votes. And I will fight for District 15 in Congress. And I'm asking for your vote and support to do just that. Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you to the Greater Chamber of Commerce in Pharr and to the great city of Pharr for hosting us today. My name is Dr. Elisa Alvarado, and I'm your candidate for Texas Congressional District 15. We are at a crossroads in this election, and experience matters. And I appreciate each and every one of you running for Congress here today. As the most experienced and qualified candidate on this panel, I understand the needs of our community and the solutions that will bring about the real change to our district. My experience with working with Congressman Rubén Hinojosa, working with the U.S. Department of Labor, developing educational program pipelines, and as well as registering and mobilizing thousands of people to vote has prepared me for this role. I know firsthand that we need strong and an experienced voice in Washington, and I am that voice. I am Dr. Elisa Alvarado, and I am asking for your vote and your support. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Alvarado. Mr. Rigney?
Thank you. Again, thank you to the City of Pharr. I'm John Villarreal Rigney. I'm a product here of PSJ.
Oh,
Graduated
she's
PSJ
next.
In 1988. Then I went on to graduate at UTPA in 1996 as an engineer. I'll give you a little bit of my background. My father, retired World War II veteran, had his mechanic shop here in Pharr on Sam Houston Street. So he died at the age of 11, and what I knew how to do was welding and mechanics, which is what he taught me. And I had to hustle, so I started mowing grass. I started going around Pharr with a lawnmower, mowing grass door to door. That led to me having a construction company, which then paid for my engineering degree. And that company has been greatly successful. And at the age of 40, I decided to go back to law school. I went to St. Mary's. I became a lawyer. And so as an educator, I mean, as an engineer and a contractor and a businessman in the Valley for my entire life, I think that's what we need in Congress at this point in time, is somebody who has a great round knowledge and experience of different aspects so that we can do the best for our district. Again, I ask for your support. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Ramirez?
Good afternoon. My name is Ruben Ramirez, and I'm running because I want to make sure that every hardworking
Doesn't look
family
like she's
here in
there. Do you
Pharr
see that?
and throughout the entire district has a fair shot at the American dream. Now, I was born and raised here in Edinburgh. My family was originally here from Pharr as well. And they instilled in me the importance of having a good work ethic, of having ethics, and having a good education. They understood that a good quality education was going to be the key to break the bonds of poverty, of generational poverty. I was lucky enough to have gone to college, and I taught at Edinburgh High chemistry and physics for 5 years, over 1,000 students. Also volunteered to go to Afghanistan with the U.S. Army and received a Bronze Star for my service and leadership and a battlefield promotion. Also, I went to law school, and now I'm a practicing attorney. Ladies and gentlemen, we're here today because you want to make sure that you pick the most qualified representative, the one that has your interests in heart, that can speak and make sure that things get passed for you. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll get on to the individual questions. And as Veronica said earlier, this question would go to one candidate only, but you all have the opportunity to respond to what you hear. And so we're going in ballot order, the ballot for Hidalgo County. So Ms. Vallejo, you take this question, if you will. What do you believe are the 3 biggest issues facing our country today, and why did you select these 3?
Absolutely. I am fighting for Medicare for all, especially for our district. We are historically the most underinsured region in all of the United States. Also, we have a deep culture of turning to going to Mexico when we need to get medication, when we need to get a checkup, when we don't want to avoid more than 1 day missed at work. My second issue that I'm fighting for is to raise the minimum wage, because it's important that we are not allowing our neighbors to be exploited. It is not reality that we are expecting people to survive off of working for $7.25 an hour, and in many cases, it's much less that. And I'm also fighting to change the way that we talk about our border region. It has been enough, and we have had enough damage done to our region by allowing election cycles again and again talk about our border region as if it's a lawless place, undeserving, and as if our people are not educated and creative enough to be the ones who have the solutions. Those are the priorities that I'm going to bring to Congress, and I'm going to make sure people are talking differently about our home.
Are we going in order?
Any order?
Yeah. So I'd be happy to talk about it if you don't mind. So biggest three things facing our country, and there's a number of things, right? One is education, especially in our district. We need to make sure that we are getting enough resources and having a lower ratio of teachers, right, to students, because we need to be pushing STEM, right, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. We can talk about minimum wage all we want, but the issue is I don't want your kids earning minimum wage. I don't want mine either. And the only way to do is to make sure that we are properly funding education. Also, our economy. Our economy here is so reliant on federal money and also federal policy, especially with Pharr here on the trade sector. We need to make sure that we are passing legislation that helps improves and speeds up trade here. Additionally, our infrastructure, to have a true interstate highway system. So that way we can make sure we bring manufacturing like car manufacturing and things of that nature. Additionally, we need to teach kids trade school so we have an able-bodied and studied and certified workforce to be able to take those jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, I'm going to start with the next question, and I will pose this question to Dr. Alvarado, and then.
I actually had a rebuttal.
Oh,
for
yes,
that.
go right ahead.
Yes, I think it's great to want Medicare for all. I just don't think it's possible to pay for it. I think that we need to be realistic about what we are wanting when we go to Washington. We wanted to have a veterans hospital for a long time. We've been wanting to have a veterans hospital for the past 2 decades, but we still don't have one. We need to go to Washington with ideas that are feasible. Yes, we should have expanded healthcare for the people here living in this region. I agree. I don't think healthcare is a luxury, but I think that we need to work with the current Affordable Healthcare Act and expand the subsidies there. I also believe that with education, we can shine light on what the Valley has done, which is work together collaboratively with every city to shine that the border isn't just a lawless area, that we have a port of entry that's productive.
Could you repeat the question real quick? I'd like.
Our country today, and why did you select these three?
Okay, so the biggest issue facing our country, not just as my colleagues have spoken about our area, the biggest issue facing our country is we're forgetting to pledge indivisible with liberty and justice for all. This country is so divided with the lack of bipartisanship that it's destroying us. So one of the first things we need to do to address, and they're correct in many of the issues that face our area, but one of the first things we need to do is go to Washington and work on bipartisanship. If we can't get that support, we're never going to address the issues here, the healthcare, the border security, the jobs, the education, the teachers, the veterans. All of those are proper points, but the fact is we need to work together to get this done.
All right, thank you.
Am I allowed to
No,
make a response to the rebuttal?
One rebuttal.
Oh, okay, sounds great, thank you.
All right, thank you. Dr. Alvarado, let me start with you on this question. You know, we're always hearing that businesses and particular industries can't find people to fill jobs, especially during the pandemic. Would you support passing immigration reform that can at a minimum allow the issuance of work visas for seasonal workers or for workers when there's a shortage in the United States?
Absolutely, I would definitely support that. And this isn't just a Democratic issue. In 1986, Reagan passed the Immigration Reform and Control Act, and that allowed for millions of people to be able to work in the United States and to contribute to the United States. And that's what we need to go back to. That was passed during a Republican administration. I think it's important that we understand that we have a workforce shortage, but we have 12 million people living in the shadows right now that can be part of that workforce. I would absolutely support comprehensive immigration reform.
Anyone who chooses to respond may. And there's a second part to this question as well. I can go to that if there's no response.
So I'll be happy to speak about it. I do agree that we do need a bipartisan legislation on this thing. But we also must understand that in order to, it's like with the mediations. I've done hundreds upon hundreds of mediations. You're not going to get everything you want. So we need to figure out, right, both Democrats and Republicans, what is our red lines and what are we willing to compromise? There no doubt is a worker shortage here, and we need to recognize that immigrant labor is key to our thriving economy. So we need to make sure that we're doing it in a way that applies with the rule of law, in a way that is humane, but also in a way that we understand what the intent of those immigrants are and how we're keeping track of them. The other question too that is, how are we going to deal with, are they going to be able to provide for themselves, as well as what's going to happen if they have children and things of that nature, right? That's some of the concerns that I've heard. But without a doubt, we do need immigration reform, but it has to be in a bipartisan way. If not, it's not going to be lasting.
Okay, so the second part of this question is, what about with regard to dreamers? Would you support passing legislation to give dreamers who are already in our country and have been here for many years a path to citizenship?
Absolutely. I support the dreamers and I support passing legislation to make them citizens here. And I believe that they contribute to this community and they are the fabric of who we are as Americans.
I'd like to address it. Both issues put together, we need border reform. We absolutely do. But just to speak about border reform in itself in an abstract way isn't sufficient. We need to have ideas, and we need to get the money that these immigrants are paying to the cartels, to the smugglers to make them swim across the river. We need to get that out of the hands. It's a twofold win. We get the money out of the wrong hands and we let the immigrants keep them. Come to the border, knock on the door, take their fingerprints, find out that they're not criminals, let them go to work. In the produce industry, in the whole farming industry, where there's such a shortage of workers, they're having to compete with them because there's no people to come in. We need to re-implement, expand the old Braceros program. We need to do something, and the dreamers, they're here, yes, we need to support them. However, we also need to know that there's some dreamers that are here, they're criminals. Some have violated the law. So we need to do a comprehensive, something that looks at everybody that wants to come in and the ones that are here to make sure they are productive citizens of our economy.
If I may. So I agree, something needs to be done. There needs to be a pathway to citizenship for these dreamers, ones that qualify. Again, it has to be done in a bipartisan approach so it has lasting change, because if not, then you'll get one administration come in, undo what the previous one did, and as we keep seeing the pendulum go left and right to the extremes. Now, we've already educated most of these dreamers, right? The taxpayers have already funded this bill to all these dreamers here. Why wouldn't you want to provide a pathway to citizenship? And I agree, we need to make sure that we're also saying, hey, the ones that have not committed violent crimes, right? The ones that have shown to be, outstanding citizens of our community, provide them a pathway to citizenship, bring them out of the shadows, and they already are absorbed into our workforce. So let's provide them a path. Let's just do it in a legal way and a humane way, and quickly in a bipartisan way.
I would like to make some comments as well. Thank you. I believe it's important to advocate for legislation that's continuous and not stop. I believe that we could tell in the way that the pandemic has affected our communities directly, and specifically our small businesses, and where they have to shut down their doors and then open up again and rehire. And this is exactly what's been happening with the immigration situation here, to where there are legislations being passed, new people being tasked with the safety and with the administration of processing people for asylum. And it's important that we understand it's a complex solution that we need to be advocating for, and not just small little temporary solutions. It's important for our communities and for our families. Many of us have deep bonds to being an immigrant or a daughter or children of immigrants, so we must understand that we're advocating for multiple generations when we ask for legislation to be a long-term solution, not just a temporary one. Thank you.
Thank you. The next question goes to you, Mr. Villarreal-Rigney. It's about border security. Because we live on the border, we're more aware of what's really happening here versus those versus how it's sometimes portrayed in the media and in other parts of the country. Question: what is your opinion of the state of our US-Mexico border? Are we safe?
So as part of my campaign, I made it a point to go to every single county all the way up to Seguin and back and speak to the people in charge. One of the meetings I had with the Sheriff Villanueva in Karnes County, we sat down and I said, Sheriff, I don't want to tell you what I'm going to do for you. I want you to tell me what can we do for this county. He says, healthcare, illegal immigration. He said, we're overrun with it. So the perception that we're out of control, it's blown way out of proportion further up north, but when we're here, we still see the impacts. We know it's out of control and we need to do something about it. But it relates back to the same question before. It's comprehensive reform that's humane for the people. I'm the son of an immigrant that came to this country chasing the American dream. However, we need to provide a citizenship that will stop and alleviate our border problem.
And a follow-up question, I will give an opportunity for responses.
You guys
from
hear all
the other
those
candidates
plates and
shortly,
stuff
but a follow-up
clanking in the
question,
back?
are you in favor or opposed to the catch and release program? Why?
The catch and release program, in its current state, it is not proper because they're not really, the immigration system, the judges, they're so backed up. All we're doing is letting them go into this country and giving them a court date that they may or may not ever come back to. We need to revise the catch and release program. I am in support of it. If they're here, they've come in through what I'm proposing to be an immigration system where they come, knock on the door, and we give them a work number. There's no more catch and release program. But until that's implemented, currently, the catch and release program needs to be revised in a way that we can keep track of these people. We can know that if they're going to come back, we can know if they're working somewhere, and we can actually process them in a proper way through the immigration system and let them gain papers to go to work, and rather than just get lost in our nation.
And one more follow-up question for you. Do you favor or oppose a border wall?
I am for a border wall. I'm in favor of it, but I'm not in favor of it in its current form. I think that as a society that we can speak to somebody on the moon, why can't we put up a border wall that's electronic, that's a smart wall, that will do the same thing without cutting off us from our resources? I grew up going to, Pepe's on the river, going jet skiing and boating and swimming and playing in the river, and we can't do that anymore. The landowners that had access, that had waterfront property, so to say, they no longer have it. Imagine having an island property that all of a sudden somebody put up a big wall between you and the beach. That's not the right solution. We can have an electronic surveillance system that does the same thing. So I'm absolutely in favor of a smart wall, and I think we're smart enough to get that done.
Any responses to those questions?
I think catch and release is just a Band-Aid, and I don't think that it's something that's feasible for this border area. I think what we need is comprehensive immigration reform, and I know that we've all talked about the fact that it's going to take a bipartisan effort to do this, but
No, but her mic just died.
Catch and release is something that we can continue with. I don't agree with that.
I'll be happy to respond. All right. So this place, this MSA, this beautiful Rio Grande Valley is one of the safest in America. And I'm proud to call it home. I have been. That's why I could have gone anywhere, but I've decided to practice here as an attorney. Now, with regards to catch and release, I'm not in favor of catch and release. However, under the circumstances that we don't have enough infrastructure, we don't have enough personnel and everything else, what is the solution? Well, the solution comes back to immigration, where we need to come up with a bipartisan solution to being able to update our asylum laws, right? To be able to expedite it, be able to expand our Article 2 judges, our immigration judges, be able to set up possibly like a green zone, like my good friend Congressman Gonzalez has been advocating in Congress, where there's a safe place in that person's country to be able to process. We can do this through Zoom. We can do this through secure communications. Now, as far as the border wall, I've talked with many Border Patrol agents. In some places it does work, some it doesn't. That's going to be part of the bipartisan discussion that we need to talk about.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Yes, absolutely. The catch and release situation and conversation is just a reflection of how chaotic the situation is, and the fact that what's on the table right now is not a viable solution. It's important that we understand that people who are asking for asylum and right across the border are right in the hands of the people who are going to take advantage of them the most. And this deeply affects our communities. I was able to go visit the 2,000 people who are refugees right now in Reynosa. And I walked through that camp. And I am not afraid to face the reality that we are dealing with right here in the border, because it's important that we face it with humanity, and it's important that we resource all the people who have been who've been answering to this call, and we hear their experiences. We hear the experiences of families that have been separated and how they have been reunited, and what are the right answers for them as well, so that we could come up with a solution that works for all of us, and not just a temporary one, but one that continues decade after decade, presidential election after presidential election.
Yeah, that silverware and the
I just want to
plates
follow up on
clanking
that.
is very
If you
annoying.
can, just give me a
Hopefully they're
one
done
yes or
soon.
no answer. So do you believe we are safe? Vallejo?
Yes.
Yes, I do.
Yes.
Unequivocally, yes.
Thank you. Now, let me ask you, those of us living on the border understand firsthand how inextricably linked the United States is with Mexico and our two economies, with Mexico being the U.S.'s top trading partner. It was also recently reported by the National Association of Manufacturers that more than 4,100 Texan manufacturers export a combined $125 billion in goods to Mexico and Canada each year. The USMCA was passed recently. Do you support the USMCA, and why or why not? And then what would you do to assure that we're ready for the increase in trade, both at the southern and northern borders? And we'll start with you, Mr. Ramirez.
Well, the predecessor with which was NAFTA was huge for this area, especially with trade and the city of Pharr, right? USMCA had a few changes to it, but it's still a great thing for this area and this region, especially this beautiful city of Pharr. And I want to applaud the city of Pharr and Dr. Ambrioso, because they've continued to grow, and the chamber, the EDC, excuse me, continue to grow and increase those exports. It's important that whoever's elected to Congress, in this case, I hope it's me, and I'd love to earn your vote, that we continue to improve on those treaties, make sure that our partners are adhering to those standards, right? Because right now there's a lot of potential dumping of produce and things like that as well, and that hurts local farmers and farmers throughout the country. Also, we need to make sure that we're looking into China, who China is purchasing a lot of manufacturers here in Mexico and trying to just dump a lot of their products through here. So yes, it is a great thing. It's been awesome for us. We need to make sure that people are playing by the rules. We need to make sure that any inconsistencies or things that are not in the favor of America or this region, that we address and get it updated.
Thank you. Any responses?
Yes.
Yes.
I have a response. Excuse me. So I believe that it's important that we have accountability and oversight, and we make sure that policy changes that are encouraging trade through our border, we have direct contact with, we have direct oversight, and it's important that our mayors have direct impact and say on how those policies are being interacted with and enforced. And I think it's important that we have more transparency when it comes to what business is being conducted in our ports of entry. I believe it's important that we benefit directly from all of that commerce, and I believe that it's important that policies that are implemented must take us into account directly. I love what the mayor said when he pointed out that it's important that we have integrity, honesty, and transparency, and I firmly believe that that's how we should be conducting business on our border.
Yeah, for the record, I'm not a fan of catch
Trade
and
with
release.
Mexico is
Catch and
the
release.
lifeblood
Never
of
been a
our
fan.
region, and I support efforts to make cross-border trade more efficient, predictable, and a fair process for workers and consumers. But in Washington, I will fight to obtain funding for proper resources for our border crossings, for infrastructure improvements like expanding the bridges and building new dedicated roadways for trucks to expedite their transit through the region. I support reducing tariffs to help producers and manufacturers sell more products and to hire more employees. This position is unique because we will not only be representing the Pharr Bridge, we will also be representing the McAllen Bridge and the Mission Bridge. And the expectation as a lawmaker is that we work together with our mayors and we understand the two problems that are happening at the border.
Thank you. So the MCA, absolutely necessary. It's grown our valley to proportions that no one ever thought the valley would grow to. And evident more than anything of that is look at the bridges that we're doing at the interchange. And I remember when they built those bridges single lane, I was just kind of a kid. But, you know, I was like, man, why are they doing single lane bridge? Don't they think the valley's going to grow? Well, sure enough, here we are, right? We're trying to do double lane bridges. So We applaud that effort. Thank you. We need it very much. But the valley is going to continue to grow, and we need to continue to support our bridges. Just the Pharr Bridge alone this year is projected to do $40 billion in exports, right? One of the things that we import the most, avocados. We do, apparently we eat a lot of avocados, $1.43 billion in avocados. I mean, we do 40 billion a year in imports. So we need to continue to support that. We need to continue to expand the bridge. We need to continue to work with the CBP and the federal agencies, the Border Patrol, the USDA, but we need to support not only free trade, we need to support fair trade. It needs to be fair to our local economy.
Thank you. Next question is about gun control. Ms. Vallejo, if you take this one. Mass shootings, and that's 4 or more people killed or injured, happen almost daily in America. In 2019, there were 417 such assaults. In 2020, there were 610, which is nearly 2 per day. Guns are involved in 75% of all murders and 51% of all suicides.
So I got a tip that there was a possible Vanessa sighting at the Antler Inn.
Gun deaths surpass
Anybody
deaths
around
from
there?
car accidents. And of the 40 million guns legally purchased in 2017, an estimated 22% were purchased without background checks. My question to you, do you support universal background checks for gun purchases? Why or why not?
I do. I do support universal background checks in order for people to have possession of a weapon like a gun. I do think it's important that we have a strong say when it comes to the laws and protections when it comes to gun safety, because it's a deep part of our culture. Many of us grew up going to the shooting range, training with our dad. Many of us grew up going hunting. So it's important that we understand that we have a say on how to keep our communities and our children safe. It has been alarming to see that guns are entering our schools. I myself grew up having to practice code I's, that there is an intruder in school, and I've only seen that sense of fear amongst our children escalate. So it's important that the adults take this into our own hands. And also as a small business owner, I want to say that when laws change, and as a leader from the Pulga who makes decision to keep my community safe, which is a 25-acre property, and we get thousands of people there every Thursday morning. They're actually having a good time there this morning right now. It's important that you understand that physical places also go through that sense of fear, and it puts the burden on business owners to have to keep our community safe on top of keeping money coming into the door so that we could be able to afford all the things that we need to keep a strong, viable team. Thank you.
And I'm not goofing on her
Thank you. A
here.
follow-up
Just a real,
question.
honestly, real
Do you have
question.
any specific proposals to strengthen gun laws?
I do. I think it's important that we close on the loopholes. Like you said, a lot of guns are being purchased illegally and during gun shows, and it's important that there's oversight and there's more accountability there. I think that there should be pride when you own a gun, and that there should be a greater culture that embraces women into the community, because every time that I've gone to the shooting range, it gives me a sense of protection and safety and power that's in my own hands. And so that's one thing that I would definitely start implementing, and also changing the culture and inviting women to start training as well.
Thank you.
I'll respond. I am a great supporter and a huge supporter. I believe firmly in the Second Amendment. I enjoy shooting, I enjoy hunting, and gun ownership, absolutely, we should have it. However, responsible gun ownership. We need responsible gun ownership. And you've asked for specific examples. So I do support universal background checks. I think that everybody that gets a weapon should be screened, but should be screened mentally maybe. The issues is not the guns with the mass shooting. The issue is the guy holding the gun. We need to include in that background check maybe mental screenings to find out if the person is a responsible gun owner. And then we need responsibility of the person to buy these guns to make sure they don't fall into the wrong hands. So the guns aren't the problem, it's the people. And all we need to do is address the concerns of the people that are buying these guns and take care of that problem, and that will hopefully be at least a dent in the issue that's going on.
Any other response?
Yes, glad to. So I unequivocally support the Second Amendment, and I stand by it. But I also do support universal background checks. I do believe that you can have both without infringing on your right. Now, I was in the military. You all know that. I'm a veteran. I'm a qualified expert marksman all the time. It's one of those things that we send our brothers and sisters in arms to go protect us, and we do that with a weapon. So weapons are not the bad thing. It's the actor and the person behind them. And I do agree that we need to make sure that we expand, that we need to have some sort of database that possibly gives a soft flag for somebody who has some kind of mental illness or has been flagged by a local police department from some threats. That way we make sure we jump ahead of it if that person is trying to purchase a weapon or understand if they have access to a weapon. It's, it goes really back to healthcare and mental health that we need to make sure. So close the loopholes on the gun purchases and also make sure we get background checks.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, just when we thought we were starting to see the light at the end of the tunnel, we saw a resurgence of COVID with the new Omicron variant. And while we're hearing good news every day that we're becoming more vaccinated and we're seeing less hospitalizations, this variant is more contagious than the Delta variant. So I want to know what your position is on mass and vaccinations. Should they be required under any circumstances? And what do you consider the responsibility of the federal government to be in aiding the stop of COVID-19? And we will start with
Elisa.
with Dr. Alvarado.
Thank you. It definitely is unfortunate that we are seeing a resurgence. But to answer your question, I do believe that vaccinations are key, particularly because of the science. We've known now that people that have been vaccinated are less likely to die should they get the virus. I don't believe that it should be mandated for people to get vaccinated. I believe people have a choice in getting the vaccine and should do so. And there was a second part to that question, Veronica?
Yes, and what do you consider to be the responsibility of the federal government when it comes to aiding the stop of COVID-19?
I think the federal government has a responsibility to give the people the correct information and to work with the cities to understand what they need and to work with the hospitals. I think the federal government needs to do a better job in providing a healthcare pipeline of workers. We have a lot of doctors and nurses that are exhausted. We have people that no longer are being cared for because there just isn't staffing. So I think the federal government needs to step up and help. I also think it's their responsibility to help small businesses, particularly during this time, because they are the backbone of our community.
Any response?
I do. I think it's important that we put in the right investments to make sure that we have the strong messaging that is necessary to reach everyone. It was the time, it was March 12, 2020, when we got the news that we had to shut down Pulga Los Portales for the first time in my entire life. And we did just that. We got on the phones, we called all of our 300 vendors at that point and let them know that the next day we were not going to open the doors, and we helped them get rid of their produce and we helped them sell the products that they had on hand. And what was so alarming is that when shutdowns were being enforced by law enforcement, there was not enough information in Spanish to get the word out. And I think that is exactly what's still happening right now. There has not been an accurate amount of information, that there has not been a strong enough force. And what South Texas needs to advocate for from Congress is that we need more money. We need more resources for all of our cities, for all of our doctors, for all of the leaders as they say, in the front lines, so that they have all the resources necessary to keep their communities and the people they serve safe.
And when you're responding also, we'd like to know, would you support any mandates under any particular circumstances, mandates for vaccinations or masks or shutdowns?
Right, so if I may address the first one. With regards to the position on the mask, I believe that mask and vaccination is a choice. I would hope that everybody would want to get one, right? Would want to get a vaccine and boosters and things of that nature. But I do believe it is a choice, right? And just like you as a business owner, if you don't want those kind of people inside, that's your right too. Now, the role of the federal government, we need to make sure that the cities and that the people are getting the accurate information, as stated. We need to make sure that we're getting the resources, and they need to provide a lot more testing abilities, because I know a lot of people are having issues trying to go to their doctor, get seen by their doctor to get tested. right, to see if they have COVID. There was such a long lead time by the time they got to the doctor. Some doctors weren't accepting them. So we need to make sure we have a better system in place. That's where the government should have an emergency system in place, just like triage, which was developed from wars by the military, to say, okay, we have a triage team. This is how we're going to execute it. And making sure that we run drills, right? Run drills on the local level so that we are all prepared to make sure that we can contain any kind of outbreak. So we were ill prepared for this. You know, it's been 100 years since the Spanish flu, but we can learn from this and move on. And that's why it's important that you have a representative such as myself that would make sure that we're advocating for those resources and making sure that this is
Thank you.
implemented.
Thank you. So first of all, I want to commend our government for the response they have done, because a year and a half, almost 2 years later, look at us. We're sitting in an awesome forum, enjoying a dinner, being able to have a fellowship. No one's 6 feet away from each other. No one's wearing masks. Without the government's aid, that would not have been accomplished today. I want to commend them. I want to commend our doctors and our nurses that have made this possible with the aid of the federal government. And it's true, they're all exhausted. But as my stances go, but getting to the questions, I believe also that masks should be required by businesses if they so do so. I don't believe the government should mandate it. I think it should be a private mandate. Vaccines as well. I don't think the federal government should have control over our bodies and tell us, you know what, absolutely, without a doubt, these are the rules and you have to do this with your body. So I don't believe in that. I believe there should be a choice. And I would not, the other question is I would not support a mandate under any form. That's all I have to say about that.
Thank you. And the next question is also about healthcare, and it will go to you, Mr. Villarreal-Rigney. The Rio Grande Valley is one of the most medically underserved regions in the state and the country. As a federally elected official, what do you consider your role to be in ensuring that our residents have access to access to affordable and equitable healthcare?
That issue is perfect. It's near and dear to my heart. I have a special needs child. The special needs community has long been overlooked in this whole healthcare debate and healthcare considerations. The 504 programs that the school provide, the healthcare system, all these special needs children, guess what they become? Special need adults. And when their parents pass away and that special need adult no longer has a parent to watch them 24 hours a day, what are we going to do? We need to address this issue. So in Texas, 60% of the uninsured, guess what? Hispanic. 56% of the uninsured families have at least one full-time employee, but they don't have insurance. That's unacceptable. So I would try to get some healthcare reform done where people can have access to affordable healthcare. I don't believe that free Medicare for all is a solution, but I do believe that the government should implement some sort of control on the health insurance companies to make healthcare affordable. Because of my special needs child, I pay right under $50,000 a year in healthcare. If I wasn't a successful businessman, I wouldn't be able to afford healthcare for my son. And that's unacceptable in a society such as ours. We need to do a better job of it.
I have a follow-up to that. So do you not believe that the Affordable Care Act provided that relief for many families that would not otherwise have access to care? Or do you believe that the Affordable Care Act needs further revisions?
Personally, in my life, when my son was born and he was 2 months old, and he died in my arms. And we rushed him. Thank God we were real close to the hospital. They were able to bring him back. Affordable health care did not cover anything that we needed in our son. So affordable health care, when it first came out, it wouldn't apply to us. It didn't benefit us. If affordable health care were the one solution to all, we still wouldn't have 60% of uninsured Hispanics. If affordable health care was doing its job, we wouldn't have 56% of uninsured people where they have a job. So affordable health care, look at the statistics. That's proof that it needs reform, and we need to do something about it.
I have something to say about that. Because of affordable health care, my dad is sitting in the audience today with a new kidney. Because of affordable health care, we were able to have him at the house and at the hospital and at the hotel room for months. I'm not saying affordable health care is perfect, By no means. But for some families, for families with pre-existing conditions, affordable health care made all of the difference in the world. And it certainly made a difference in mine.
Any other rebuttals?
Yes, I'd like to make a few comments. I am advocating for Medicare for all, and I want to list just a few countries that have had this enforced, and their citizens have had universal health care, and I want to read a few years. Australia, 1975. France, 1974. Japan, 1938. Germany, 1941. Portugal, 1979. We are so behind, and it's important that we value ourselves, our family, and our community. And healthcare is the great equalizer. I used to think that it was money that people needed in order for them to create a better life for themselves, but my family did well in business. My family was able to have enough money to go to Dallas, Fort Worth, to go to Houston, to take my mom to do experimental medical research so that maybe she had a chance. Not many have that. And so it's important that, especially in this region, we advocate for that. And I want to put that on everyone because the change starts with us. Thank you.
I'd like to be able to speak about that. So we need to make sure that we have access to affordable care. And the Affordable Care Act has been a great starting point, but we need to make sure that we update it and that we make sure that we expand it. And that can be done through legislation and bipartisanship, right? We can instantly get millions of people back on it by requiring states to expand that. Now, a personal story, my youngest son has autism, right? And he was diagnosed with autism, and luckily, I had insurance, but even then it was very, very expensive. And my wife and I poured every single cent, and I worked extra jobs just to make more money, to make sure that he had aggressive care, that he had a whole bunch of therapy to get him back to norm, or to get him to where he needed to be. And to this day, my son, you cannot tell that he has autism, but he laughs, he jokes, and he jokes with you, it's beautiful. But I remember seeing the kids that had Medicaid, and that only got one therapy session per month. Who's looking out for them?
Next question.
Well, I want to follow up, and again, a yes or no question. Do you support Medicare for all? I know
Yes.
Ms. Vallejo said yes. Dr. Alvarado?
I think in an ideal world, I would support Medicare for all. However, I don't see how we can pay for that. So, no, I wouldn't support it.
Mr. Villarreal-Rigney?
I cannot support it just blanket. Again, I agree with her. It would be beautiful if we could do that, but we can't afford it.
Mr. Ramirez?
Medicare for all is not the way to go at this moment, but there are solutions that we can do. I'd love to be able to talk more about it, but.
All right. We're going to move on to education, near and dear to my heart. And fortunately, our region has several higher education institutions. We have a technical school, community colleges, universities, and even a medical school. What role do you think you have as a member of Congress to make sure that our youth are able to attend an institution of higher education if that's the path that they choose? And I believe we are now on Mr. Ramirez.
Yes. So as a representative, you go up to Washington and you fight and you make deals so that you can represent your community and bring what is necessary to address their needs. And that's exactly what I can do. And just like you, Veronica, education is near and dear to my heart. I'm the only licensed educator here. You know, I did it for 5 years. I understand the struggles that our teachers are facing. My wife's an educator too. So my job as a representative is to come, listen to you guys, go fight, execute, bring down that money so that we can implement what we need to do. And a few things near and dear to my heart are STEM. We need to make sure that we're not aiming for minimum wage for our children. We want them to exceed, to excel, to live their God-given talent, right? And that's what's going to take care of the healthcare system too. When we have more young scientists, more young doctors becoming doctors and expanding and staying here. Or the same thing with engineering and mathematics and stuff. And that's how we start sharing that brain power instead of that brain drain that we tend to have where our kids, our nieces and nephews get educated, they leave, and then they never come back, right? We need to stop that brain drain, and we can do it together as a community. It's going to take money, and it's going to take a consensus, but on the local leadership level, we need to make sure that we continue to elect the right leaders so that they can spend that money correctly. And then also not forget about those kids who are not going to go to college. Give them a trade. Let's start at the sophomore and junior year so they have certified licenses by the time they graduate.
Any response?
Education is near and dear to my heart, and unlike what one of my opponents said the last time, I actually did spend time in the classroom. I've spent most of my career helping to train students for jobs of the future, and I've worked with employers to align curricula to real-world employer needs. I helped develop the first in the nation nursing program to graduate high school students as nurses. That's in the country, not just here in the state of Texas. Hispanic serving institutions need more money. UTRGV is the second largest Hispanic serving institution, and yet we don't have the money. Black colleges get the money. Why can't we get the money? It's important to have somebody in Congress to advocate for that, and I will be that person.
We most definitely need to have the strongest advocate in Congress to be fighting for not just our children, but also for everyone in our workforce who needs to get prepared for the jobs of the future. We no longer can allow for our workforce to be trained on fixing things from the past, but we must look into the future. And I really love sharing that when I was 7 years old, I was found by my educators and I was set on a path so that I could self-actualize, so that I could attain an Ivy League education. I could continue having every experience in my life being a learning one. So it's about the mindset, and it's important that we advocate for free college and free trade school and to eliminate student debt, because right now only the rich can afford an education. And when it comes to our workforce that is so strong and so young, we need to make sure that when we're attracting employers, that our workforce is ready. Thank you.
I don't agree that only the rich can afford college. I've told you before, my father died when I was 11, and I mowed grass, I raked leaves, I washed cars. That led to painting houses, to doing little patch jobs. That led to bigger construction jobs. If we have a drive, you can get there to college. Now, nobody should have to work as hard as I did to pay for my college education. When I graduated as an engineer, I was debt-free. When I graduated from law school, I was debt-free, but I worked my tail off to pay for that education. That builds character. So absolutely just giving everything for free to everybody, I don't think is the right solution. But we also need to push trades, like they say. Firsthand, as a general contractor, I know what plumbers, electricians, carpenters, we have a shortage of those. Not everyone is college material. We need to take away the stigma of not being a college grad and teach our students and our kids that being a trade or vocational is an excellent way to make a living as well.
And on that note, I just want to point out to all of you, because one of you will be elected, hopefully, and will represent the Rio Grande Valley, that the Pell grants that our students rely upon so heavily, we have so many students that rely on financial aid. The Pell grants have been very instrumental in helping students to go to school. We hope that y'all, whoever gets elected for this, is going to continue to support increased Pell so that we can have more of our students getting a college education.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you. The next question is about the internet, and the question will be for you, Ms. Vallejo. COVID shed light on another giant spotlight, and that is the need to reach the last mile in broadband coverage here in the Rio Grande Valley. How do you see yourself ensuring access to high-speed internet service by 2024?
Absolutely. I would immediately start working with our mayors and with our school districts to make sure that they have the right tools and the right people and workforce that they are working with, that's specifically focusing on making sure that all of our students and everyone in our region has access to broadband and to the internet. I did end up applying to college when I didn't have internet in my home, and it was very
I think she missed the question. It's not how would you
2008. That was many
let
years
them
ago
have
now.
access, but how would you
It's
provide
important that we
access,
understand that those challenges
internet
are
access,
still
right?
being felt, But right now, it's a matter of life and death, really. I was able to access higher education through a virtual program, and it's important to understand that it does work. We need to advocate for these resources and tools, because otherwise our children and our talent are going to have to be stripped away from our homes in order to achieve the greatest opportunities that they're being called for. So we need those resources here, and we need them now. We need to make sure that we're empowering our parents as well, so they understand these tools and know how to support their children at home. Thank you.
I think it's important to have resources, but I also think it's important to have models. And we're standing here in the city of Pharr as one of the models for broadband. And the leadership that the city brought together and the task force that was brought together to make that happen didn't happen overnight. That's what needs to happen to other parts of this region. We need to work together in partnerships to understand what works and what doesn't. It's one thing to say, yes, we need to have resources so every household has internet. And it's a completely other thing to say, we need to go the last mile and fiber needs to be dug and it needs to go to every home. And that's something that I learned through this project here at the city of Pharr. So I commend the partnerships here, and I believe that that's the way to go. Look for models that are already established and successful.
I commend as well Pharr for their broadband service that they're putting out to everybody. And it brings to mind an old movie, and I'm going to age myself a little bit, but I remember a movie said, if you build it, they will come. Well, in order to build it, they needed money. In order for Pharr to build this, they needed money. So what I would do in Congress is try to pass legislation, try to get funding to do some stimulus bill, something, an allocation that would provide for broadband, but not just, here across the nation. I live half an hour outside the city limits. Half a mile outside the city limits in Edinburgh. And if it wasn't for my hotspot on my phone, I'd still have dial-up. It's ridiculous. But we need money so that the cities can implement and use Pharr as a model. It can be done. We just need to get the allocations and the funding to the communities so they can bring us into the 21st century and prepare us for the next century.
As a young student, I remember getting those AOL CDs and those Netscape CDs and those Juno CDs. I didn't have access to the internet, or we didn't have money to be able to pay for it. But I would take those CDs and I would sign up for the free minutes that they would get you, and I'd use them wisely so I could expand my education, because I knew I didn't want to be poor anymore, right? And I signed up under so many people's names, uncles, dads, grandmas, grandpa, even myself. Now, not having high-speed internet, not having broadband is the equivalent of that. It's a necessity. And I applaud the city of Pharr for expanding those things. But as your representative, that is a need. I will go and fight for that funding to make sure that the communities have that money that they need to be able to implement that. It's local government's job, and you keeping tabs on them to make sure that they spend that money wisely. That's the role of the representative.
Thank you. I do want to recommend to you, if you haven't read the book, Fiber, it's a very good book, and it talks about how today internet is, or broadband is the electricity of decades ago, right? Electricity was once seen as a luxury, and then became, of course, a necessity. We can't even imagine life without it. Same thing with fiber. And so I too want to commend the city of Pharr for taking leadership in this area. There are grants right now that are being that are out there for people to, and cities and counties and educational institutions, all that, to expand their fiber. So we hope that whoever is elected will continue to support those efforts. Our next question will be on transportation. And we all know this near and dear every day. We drive the Rio Grande Valley. And so I want to ask you, how will you help address the traffic congestion and need for additional means to commute across the Rio Grande Valley if you are elected as our representative? And let's start with you, Dr. Alvarado.
Well, I think one of the most important things to note when it comes to transportation is that we now have a joint RMA, and that has provided us a big pool of funding. And we are now competing with other areas of the state, Dallas, Houston, Austin, and what we need to do in order to combat what you were talking about and ensuring that transportation flows is we need to work with the RMAs and we need to work with the local cities and governments and come up with a plan. As a member of Congress, I think it's important to serve as a liaison to all of the different organizations that work together for a common good, and that's what I would do to address that issue.
Now, a while back, the pork barrel spending was done away with, right, because it had a negative connotation. And what happened is a study showed that instead of the bipartisanship happening, it actually drove a wedge between both parties. And now it was really hard to move any kind of legislation. Now, Congress has brought that back, but in the form of earmarks, right? That's where my experience as an attorney, as a negotiator, having done hundreds of mediations, right, and doing it very well, where I would go and make sure that we get that funding for our transportation needs, for our infrastructure needs, right? You're not just voting on somebody that sounds great. You're voting on somebody that has a history of success in their profession, success in the various professions that they've had, such as myself, right? We need to continue to also plan ahead. And I do agree, I want to commend Dr. Ambrioso for bringing all the region together so that way we can spend our money wisely.
So,
Any-
yes, please. I just, the ladies first wanted to rebut.
Thank you.
No, okay. So I don't know if it's what would we do as funding or what we do in the valley, but in the valley, I've always said before we need a third lane on the interchange, we need to look at some of the larger cities and think of take them as a role model. I think the valley needs overpass from Edinburgh all the way to McAllen that comes maybe like Bicentennial or Ware Road or somewhere in that neck of the woods. And if we can have an overpass, I come from Edinburgh all the time, and you either have to come to the expressway and it's crowded, you have to come down 2nd Street or McCall or Jackson, and it's bumper to bumper traffic. We need an overpass that comes from Edinburgh to McAllen, some sort of expressway. That's one of the ideas I had for the valley. But in order to get that idea done, we need to move it. And we need people like the RMA to take charge, but we need funding. I commend on I-69, hopefully we'll get that done real soon, but it took funding. So again, I'll fight for funding for the ideas that I have. Born and raised in the valley, I've seen it explode and I know the needs of it, and I can foresee the expansion that we're going to go through as well in the next decade or 20 years.
I have a few comments. Thank you. I would definitely advocate for a regionalized approach in order to tackle this problem. It isn't one that we need to wait into far into the future to policy, and it takes so long to make any change. So I think we would immediately need to make sure we're cutting out any unnecessary processes and making decisions when it comes to transportation, as well as advocating for stipends and advocating for benefits that our cities and our region could take part in so that we could prioritize this. It's so funny because right before the shutdown, I myself convinced my dad to buy a bus for the Pulga so that we could bring more people, because we also have to think about public transportation and those people who are cut out from having access to their doctors or to even the grocery store or where to go pay their bills. So I really want to implement a priority on public transportation and helping everyone who's working on this right now already.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next question is about colonias, and this is for you, first of all, Mr. Villarreal-Rigny. The Rio Grande Valley has many census-designated places with communities that lack proper infrastructure, lighting, and as we just talked about, internet access. If elected, how will you work to better these communities and the quality of life of the Texans that live in those areas?
It's right up my alley. One of the things I do is I do development, right? I do subdivision, I do infrastructure, I do drainage projects. I know the needs of those areas. I mean, as I said, I live just half a mile outside the city limits of Edinburgh, and I don't have internet. I don't have sewer. I have a water line that I have a 2-story house, and at 5 o'clock, 5:30, when everybody gets home, I can't get water on my 2nd floor because the water lines aren't sufficient. There's a great need of infrastructure in the valley. And I would take that over in the colonias, or like I said, even worse. I've visited the colonias. I've gone through there during Christmas. We give out gifts in colonias. They're horrible conditions, but it takes regulations, and it takes regulation on developers like myself to quit building that type of stuff. Years back, they passed the anti-colonial law, which prevented anybody that wanted to subdivide a piece of property less than 10 acres had to go through a subdivision process. That way the government could try to get them to put in streets and sewer and water and stuff like that, but it's not enough. It's still horrible. The colonias that are out there that got done before that need to be addressed, and I know firsthand the needs of them. I've done the work, and I will go to Washington and advocate for funding and legislation to stop it and to improve those colonias, including broadband.
Any responses?
Yes, we need to ask ourselves, why do people choose to go live out there? The reality is because that's what they can afford. So it brings us back again, once again, to education and making sure that we are giving people the opportunity to live that American dream, to be able to reach their full potential, and the underfunding in our schools. That's why they're out there. It's too expensive. And if we continue to focus on education and we start investing in our infrastructure here, and we bring up our interstates to the levels that's a true interstate, so that way we can qualify and be that beacon that manufacturing is truly looking for, right? Like a car plant and things of that nature. Then they will come, it will rise everybody up together. Now, we do need to get additional funding for them because that's a few years out, right? But we need to make sure that we are getting them access to clean water and sewers and things of that nature. But the real problem is, it's about that, what can they afford? And we cannot afford to ignore them anymore, or our education system.
Yeah, I have a few remarks for that. I think the question we need to be asking is, why are the people of the colonias not here with us right now? Why are they not in this room? And it's because for so long, people are forgotten in the colonias. The thought is that they don't know better, they're not smart enough, they don't have enough money or enough ganas to do things for themselves. But I want you to understand that the people of the colonias know my name because I've been working with them for years. And it's not just through the pulga. I went and knocked on the door at Loop and I told them I am serving a large community of people that have been largely underserved, and it cost them thousands of dollars to get access to running water. And that's in the city of La Jolla, and it's horrible. And this is what I'm coming with to fight for in Congress. It's these perspectives, and it's understanding that the people of the colonias deserve to be at the table to be making these decisions for themselves and talking about the needs that they have, not others coming with a lot of money saying, here, we're going to fix the problem for you. That's not how it is. We need people to have the pride and the honor to self-actualize for themselves. Thank you.
I, during the campaign, have had the opportunity to go visit several of the different counties, and one of the counties that is really near and dear to my heart is Brooks County, and I went to Falfurrias, and I actually spent a couple of days there canvassing, and one of the things that they told us was, do you know that we have less housing now than we had 5 years ago? Do you know that we used to have a Walmart and now we don't even have that? That people drive 2 hours to teach at Falfurrias every day because they can't live there. These are real issues. These are issues similar to those that we have here with the colonias. And what we need is an understanding that funding is important, but understanding how to get funding is also important.
Thank you. I have a follow-up question, and it stems from what Ms. Vallejo just said there. We had this conversation very recently when you made the point that it's very rare for chambers of commerce and colonial groups to ever be at the same table. And I told you how, but the only time I've seen it in my reporting is when there was total universal opposition to the border wall in the early days. And one of the chambers in the valley wanted numbers. They wanted the community groups to be at a town hall meeting. We rarely see that. You are pledging to bring both communities together. You've said that. I'd like to ask the other 3 candidates, if elected, would you also work towards bringing and instigating meetings between chambers and colonial groups together at the same time?
Absolutely. I think it's a great idea. I think anytime we have groups of interest that come together to talk about issues, that's when change happens. And unless we start doing that, and unless we start being open to the fact that there are different interests in our communities that need to be heard, then change is going to be stagnant. So yes, I would definitely support that, Steve.
I say it over and over again, God created us all equal. We're all one, no one is better than another. We all bleed red, we all have blood in our veins, we bleed the same. Again, the problem, the divisiveness, we need to work together. So absolutely, I would work to get everyone, not only the colonias and the chambers. The last time we had a flood, it didn't just flood colonias. It flooded some of our nice neighborhoods in North McAllen, neighborhoods where lawyers live, businessmen. It flooded a lot of areas. So not only the colonias have this issue, we all have to work together. But we do need to have a resource. Historically, the colonias go underserved because maybe, they're afraid to come out, right? At that attendance that you say they didn't show up, they're afraid to come out. So we just need programs, people to go talk to them, say, guys, there's nothing to be afraid of. We are all the same. We all have the same goals. We all have the same needs. Please come out, join us, because we want to work together. And that's what needs to be done.
Absolutely. Like I tell people, if and when elected your congressman, I don't care whether you voted for me or didn't vote for me, whether you live in a colonia or a mansion, right? Whether you're educated or not educated. I'm here to represent you, to listen to your needs, to listen to the needs of our communities, of your families. And I do agree that the colonias, just like any other residents, should have a place at the table. They should be able to communicate their needs and their frustrations. As a representative, I'll definitely listen to that.
Thank you, and I want to encourage all of you as you're saying this. I know that you have the best interests at heart. There are special interests, though, that many times you will have people, developers and others that do have money that will come to you and ask you not to implement a certain change or not to do certain things because it will cost them more money. Mr. Rigney, you mentioned earlier that you were a developer. And so if you're elected, I want your assurance that you will listen to the common man who doesn't have the access to the special interest groups, for all of you, that you will listen also then to the community that is in need, because special interests, once you're up in DC, there will be lobbyists that will be coming to you. They're the ones that have the money, and they're the ones that will be able to write a check, and that those interests will sometimes conflict with what some of your people in the community need back home. So encourage that. And speaking of which, I think, Mr. Ramirez, I'm starting with you on this one, and you mentioned flooding a moment ago, and our region has continuous problems with flooding, and especially in smaller towns and lower income areas that severely impact the lives of members of these communities. So if elected, how would you work to fix some of these issues?
Right. So it's all about the funding, right? Making sure that you get adequate funding from the government, legislation that's passed. I'm sure you've heard of earmarks and riders. It's making sure you have the ability to negotiate and communicate, to be able to have mutual respect on the other side of the aisle and say, okay, this is what your community needs, but this is what mine needs too. It's just like any mediation that I do. As a matter of fact, I have one at 1:30, right? And you try to reach that common ground, but you need somebody that's going to have the fortitude to make sure that you don't give into special interests, right? To make sure that you have the strength to be able to say, I'm sorry, I cannot do that, right? That's a bad deal for my constituents. And I've definitely walked away from a lot of bad deals that made no sense for my client or any of the constituents or the people that I serve. So it's getting that funding, making sure that we have communication with the mayors and the city staff so that they can voice what their needs are for what particular reason, going and executing that mission and making sure that we get it done so that way we can get that funding. And as a representative, that's exactly what I'm going to do.
Am I allowed to rebut? So my father, like I said, he died in 1982. He was 66 years old. But I was raised in a different generation where back then when you gave someone your word and you shook hands, that was your word. So if I could, I'd shake your hand and guarantee you that I'm not going to fall to special interest groups. You know why? I know the needs of the valley. I'm the contractor that's building a multi-million-dollar drainage project in Westaco right now to alleviate flooding for these areas. I've done it. I'm doing it. I will continue to do it. and I will continue to fight in Washington to provide funding for these projects. Not the special interest groups, guess what? They don't vote for me. You guys vote for me. So why would I take their money to do something wrong to you when you guys are the ones who aren't going to vote for me on the next term? I need to go and fight for us and what's best for our districts, not what's best for the special interest groups. So I guarantee you that.
I think special interest groups would need to go visit where I grew up, which is, shout out to Citrus Bay here in Pharr. Then they could tell me about what I need to be doing for my community. I think that a lot of the members here have talked about funding and how we need to get funding and how we need to apply for funding. I've actually written grants to apply for funding, and I'm talking about multi-million-dollar grants. I'm talking about over $88 million worth of grants. When I talk about funding, I talk about it because I know how to get it. And it's not just by saying that I know how to get it. I understand the process that it takes in the federal government to obtain funding for this region.
So I'm a progressive Democrat, if that wasn't clear already. And I am fighting for a federal jobs guarantee program to make sure that our workforce, and I'm thinking about those in oil and gas, have exactly what they need to transition into the jobs of the future. I think it's important that we understand that infrastructure is crumbling nationwide, but we need someone in Congress that is fighting for South Texas, that is fighting for the issues that our cities are having to deal with. I was on the phone with the mayor of Palmview, and he was telling me that there's a 30-year contract that he is having to pay. The city is having to pay to get out of because that contractor is nowhere to be found. And before they're able to prioritize fixing things and preparing things for the future, they're stuck having to deal with things from the past. So that is exactly why I am fighting for a federal jobs guarantee and for the federal government to get involved with money and for our people to directly benefit from that immediately. Thank you.
Thank you. I think we've come to the last question. I've got one. No, actually, no, this is my last one. So this will be for you initially, Ms. Vallejo, and it's all about federal earmarks. Earmarks, which appropriate funds for specific projects in members' districts, were very popular until they were done away with in 2011. But some people argue that the moratorium on the earmarks didn't really do away with them at all and only made them less transparent. But I'm actually told by a neighboring congressman that they're back, but under a different name. Do you support federal earmarks? Why or why not?
I support federal earmarks in the sense that I support for there to be a direct access in order for us to access money directly. I will fight for whatever process is the best for us in order to get that money in the hands of people who are tasked with being responsible and serving our community members. And I think it's important that right now, when people are having conversation on whether or not our president is being effective or not, I want you to hold your members of Congress responsible because those are the people who are speaking for you. And whether it's for earmarks or any other financial benefit that we could take advantage of, I want you to hold whatever leader that you vote for. And I really desperately and seriously ask you for your vote because I am the one who's bringing people to the table. I'm the one that's bringing the Latino electorate. I'm the one that's bringing youth voters into this process so that we all have a say. Thank you.
Responses?
I support earmarks 100%. I think that working for a member of Congress for 15 years during the time when earmarks were available, I understand that earmarks can make a difference in a particular project. And not just in the areas of education, but in small business, in infrastructure, in city development. I think it's important that we use the type of funding that's available from the federal government to directly impact our district.
I support, sorry.
Go ahead, Joe. Go ahead.
I mean, I support any vehicle that will allow funding for certain projects that are necessary for our community, whether it be by earmarks or any other procedure, but they must be transparent. It has to be done transparent. Right now, there's so many bills going through and there's funding just snuck in there for things that we don't even know about. So one of the things I'm vowing to do again, give you my word, is when there's legislation that's coming before us, whether it's earmarked or not, we may not know about half of the stuff that's in there. And I vow to come back to all of my areas and have town hall meetings, areas where I can sit down with the people and say, look, guys, here's the pros and cons of these bills. Here's what's good. Here's what's bad. What do you want me to do? I'm not going to vote on what I want. I'm going to vote on what my community wants and what my community needs. So I absolutely support full transparency and funding from the government, and I will fight for that.
I think you know my position already on earmarks, right? I brought it up a little bit earlier a few times. I do support the earmark process. As I told you about that study, right? We ended up more polarized once they away with it. I do believe in bringing bipartisanship. The way to be able to do that is to be able to have these earmarks. And I want to also add that it must be done transparent. So I do agree that it must be transparent. And I think that was one of the issues that they had previously. I will tell you that beforehand, it made a great speaking note when they did away with them, right? Because you were talking about pork and all this other stuff. We tried it. Great. Didn't work. It got us to the point that we are today. And it's okay. We need to just make sure that we fixed it, or that we fix it as we did. And we'll be able to now get the earmarks that we need. And I will fight and negotiate. That's my specialty, to make sure that we get the funding that we need, that our families deserve, that your kids deserve, so that we can have a quality life and education.
Thank you. And a follow-up question, as you generally seem supportive of earmarks with certain safeguards, are there any individual projects that you'd like to tell us about now where you feel you would need earmarked money? And this is a great opportunity for you.
Yeah.
Might get you some extra votes.
I would definitely, again, education. That's the biggest thing, to make sure that we're training our kids and in the STEMs, just like I told you, but also for the vocational. I've been saying this since I started teaching back in 2007, that we need to make sure that we are getting our kids certified, the ones that are not going to go to college, right? So that way they have all the certifications and licenses that they need and the experience they need when they graduate, so that they can become a full productive member of society, so that they can be able to provide for themselves. And what's going to happen when they start getting those nice big paychecks? They're going to go out and spend it. And when they start spending it within our economy, that's what keeps the economy going. More jobs are going to need to be hired, right? And all of a sudden, then we become a big powerhouse. So that's definitely one of the issues. We also need to have funding for those that might have already graduated and are trying to figure out what to do. Let's get them trained in the vocational area. Definitely transportation. We're behind the curve here, so that's definitely something we need.
I would have earmarks for workforce pipelines in this region, particularly in healthcare. Any student that wants to be a CNA, an MA, RNA, any type of healthcare pipeline, I would earmark money for that. And in addition to that, I would have connectivity as my number one for earmarks. I think that if all of the schools are connected through broadband and all of the region is connected, then we will be successful. Those two projects would be near and dear to my heart. Obviously, providing veterans their hospital. Finally, if I could earmark it, I would do it. I think it's important that we know that earmarks are probably not going to come back in the same usual way, but if they do, those would be my top 3 projects.
Definitely, thank you. So there are many groups in our community that have urgent issues that they're facing that is number one to them. And so what's important for me to understand when I get to Congress is how close are we to getting that money? How close are we to the work that Representative Gonzalez has been working on to getting more for South Texas? And how could we build on and making sure we're not spending money or asking for money in ways that are temporary solutions, but understanding what are the greater plans and breaking that down so that we understand that bit by bit we could get there. And nothing is too lofty. South Texas is deserving of the greatest access to healthcare, the greatest education, the best jobs. And that's why we need to make sure what are our big goals, get into alignment there, and then break it down and advocate to make sure that we're taking those steps productively and effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. I think the biggest issues that I would fight for funding immediately, again, education, healthcare, and border security. Out of the three, we need a lot of money for education, but our public education system is so far behind the rest of the world that, we can't accept that anymore. We have the charter schools that have been taking over the job of the public education system. I'm a product of public education. Our teachers within the public education system are struggling. Our teachers should never have to use their money to go buy crayons or little things, knickknacks to give to the students to help them learn. We should have money for our teachers. Our teachers work so much overtime. Our teachers do all these extra chores that they shouldn't have to spend on top of that their own money to buy stuff for their students, and they do it out of their love, but they shouldn't have to do that. There should be money for our education system. So again, we need to provide for our education system. We need to provide for all the others that I said. Thank you.
Well, thank you to all of you. Now, before we close it out, we're going to give you an opportunity, like we did at the beginning, to have a minute and to give your closing remarks. If there's anything we were not able to cover and you want to cover in your closing remarks, please do so. And we will start again with the order on the ballot. Ms. Vallejo.
Yes. Well, thank you everyone for your time and attention today. My name is Michelle Vallejo, and I'm running to represent you and everyone in our community in Congress. Our district, Texas 15, is wide and diverse, and we have many needs. And I have the breadth of experience and the breadth of perspective in order to fight for us all. I am here and I'm asking for your vote, and I am here to also share that I am endorsed and supported by not only Lupe Votes, but also the Young College Democrats, as well as by Wendy Davis, as well as by the United Farm Workers Union, and also the Hidalgo County Tejano Democrats. And it doesn't stop there. I need your support. I need your vote. I need you to bring out your family, bring out your loved ones to the polls. We are the answer to democracy. We are democracy. Having our voices heard, having our voices come together and be amplified in Congress is the only way that we're going to be able to achieve a greater South Texas for us all today and in the future. Like I said, I am Michelle Vallejo, and I'm asking you to join me in this fight. You could find me online at Michelle or tx15.com. And thank you for your time today.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you to the City of Pharr and the Chamber. I would like to thank everyone who joined us here and everyone who is watching online, the candidates that are here. My name is Dr. Elisa Alvarado, and I'm asking for your vote and your support to be the next district representative for District 15. Growing up, my parents always taught me that it's important to give back to the community, and it's important to be an advocate for what you believe in. There was a joke when I was little that my mom would say, "Eres una hormiga en mi oído." You're a little ant in my ear. Well, I plan to be that ant, and I plan to be that ant in Congress for you. And I want to advocate for more funding and more resources for this area. For more information on my campaign, you can look me up, elisalvaradoforcongress.com. I ask for your vote and your support in this election. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Again, I'm not going to Congress to do what's best for me. I'm going to Congress to do what's best for you guys. I'm a family man. I've been married 25 years, coming this June to the same girl. Okay, just to be clear. You never know. I have two boys. One is 19, one is 16. Okay. It was a struggle to make the decision to switch from running for judge to running for Congress. But my family and I, we prayed about it. We talked about it, and we decided, you know what? It's a greater cause. It's a greater good. Let's go do that. So I'm going to Washington to work for you guys. Every piece of legislation, I'm not going to cave to the PACs. I'm not going to cave to the big money. I'm going to do what's best for you and only what's best for you. I'm John Villarreal Rigney. You can look up my website, villarrealrigneyforcongress.com. I appreciate your support. There's a lot of my story in there, a lot more on my platform, and I would appreciate your vote. Thank you.
Thank you for joining us. Thank you for hosting. Again, my name is Ruben Ramirez. You all have a tough decision to make. We're here today because we want to become informed voters, because you're going to select somebody to go represent you in Washington. And you need to make sure that that person is the most electable. I'm proud to have earned multiple endorsements from national committees, from Democrats Serve, from Vote Vets, from from also New Politics, and a whole host of other ones. Congressman Ruben Gallego, who's chairman of Bold PAC, which is the political action committee of the Congressional Hispanic Caucus, and a bunch of others. But I'm running because I want to make sure that all our families have a fair shot at the American dream. I want to make sure that they have a quality education and a quality way of life here. I want to make sure that special interests aren't in the ear of a congressman or woman. And I'm definitely that one that has the fortitude and the skills to be able to go and fight for you. That's what I do for a living. Ladies and gentlemen, if I don't win, I'm going to be okay, and my kids are going to be okay. But I want to go to Congress so I can make sure that all our families have the opportunity. And that's why I'm doing this. And I would be honored for your vote and that of your families and your support. VoteRuben.com. Thank you, and God bless you. Oh, and my wife, she got mad that I didn't mention her. I love you, Jules, who's watching online. We got 2 boys, so thank you.
Well,
Same
thank you
woman, too.
again. Thank you again to all of you for putting yourself out there to run and represent our communities. It's so critical that we get people that really care and want to do the job. It is not an easy job, and we commend you for doing that. And so please, now we had asked people not to clap or heckle, and still don't heckle, but please let's give them a round of applause to all these candidates.
This was actually pretty good.
Again, thank you so much for being here. We want to thank everyone. We want to thank our candidates, our city commission, of course, our moderators, Ms. Veronica Gonzalez, Steve Taylor. Thank you so much for being here. And again, this entire event was live streamed throughout our social media platform. So please, if anybody missed anything or you walked in late, everything is on our social media for the city of Pharr. Again, we want to, hope everyone sticks around. We want to get some pictures. And I know Mr. Mario Liscano wants to thank other people that joined us pretty late. We also want to thank Ms. Laura Hinojosa, who is here. She's representing Hidalgo County District Clerk. We also want to thank some of the Chamber of Commerce, the greater Pharr Chamber of Commerce board members that were here. Mr. Ernesto Sepulveda, thank you so much. Again, this was Battle of the Minds, a political forum, a political debate with a great collaboration, of course, the city of Pharr and the Chamber.
Thank you. And as we close this event, we want to make sure that we thank our honorable mayor and our city commission for all the support they give to all our Chamber of Commerce. I want to make sure to give special thanks to Marcela Beas and also to Veronica Gonzalez to make sure that they're our chamber staff that are a big part of it. But without our city of Pharr support, all their staff, everybody that was here today, we would have not made this possible. So I'm going to ask if our mayor and our city commissioners can come up here and take some pictures for us, please. And again, God bless each and every one of you, and God bless the United States of America. We can have our chamber board come up also to join us with these pictures.
All right, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Hope you enjoyed that. I thought it was pretty good. It would have been better, more fireworks if you know who would have showed up. But it is what it is. And we'll see where she pops